I'm going to call up Yvonne and Kimberly to give a DEP update.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you for having us. I'm Yvonne Hall, for those of you that don't know me. I'm the Assistant Director of Municipal Wastewater, and my group at Connecticut Deep, we manage the permits for the treatment plants and everything related to your wastewater facilities, and we also administer wastewater grants, including the Clean Water Fund. I have Kimberly Cianci with me. She is the Fiscal Administrative Manager for the Clean Water Fund. She's my counterpart, my group that does the technical stuff, and she does the fiscal stuff. So, you know, we've been asked to talk about the Clean Water Fund, even though I know PFAS was also mentioned, but I don't have anything in this talk about PFAS, but I'm happy to take any questions that you guys have. So, you know, thanks for having us. So, quick agenda. I'm just going to do a few housekeeping things related to nitrogen and EMORs, or monthly operating reports, and then I'm going to talk specifically about the Clean Water Fund, and then Kim will also give her perspective and, you know, try to give you guys some tips on how to work the Clean Water Fund for your projects. So, you know, usually we have all of our staff with us, but unfortunately we weren't able to bring them all today. You guys might have noticed that there's a lot going on with the new federal administration, and, you know, a large part of our agency is funded with different kinds of federal grants, not just those related to the Clean Water Fund. And so, you know, we've had to tighten our belts, but we're very happy to be here. These are some of the updates that Carlos Esguerra and Stacey Papano, you guys probably know, are the supervisors of our group, have asked me to provide. So we have the draft 2024 nitrogen credit prices out. And when I say draft, I just wanted to note that I know that facilities that are buying credits received draft invoices. I'm going to tell you guys not to pay those yet because we expect a little tweak in our credit prices, but it's not going to be much. For 2024, the buyer's price is $530, and for sellers, it's $242. The first half of last year was pretty wet, which affected nitrogen prices, but then it was a little bit drier the rest of the year. So as I mentioned, there's going to be a slight tweak, I think like a penny or two, but that was just because some of the data that was reported to us, we found out that some of the numbers were transposed, so apologies for that. But we expect to get those final invoices out to everybody by the first or second week of June, and then the sellers should expect to receive their money by mid-August. I've also been asked to talk a little bit about the electronic MORs. As you operators are aware, we implemented a new system last year where the MORs, instead of everything just being submitted with paper or different kinds of Excel spreadsheets, we tried to standardize everything, and we've been getting some errors when people decide that they tweak the format of the Excel spreadsheet. So I think everybody had an opportunity with their MORs to set up a format that was agreed upon with DEEP. And so sometimes when people are tweaking that, I guess it causes some issues, and we just wanted to let you know that if you do want to make any changes to your spreadsheet, don't just make the changes to the spreadsheet. Come talk to DEEP first so that your report doesn't get kicked out. So, you know, the whole theme, I guess, that I think of with this talk is trying to make your jobs easier because, you know, full disclosure, DEEP knows that reporting data to us and giving information to us is a pain in the butt. We know this, and we are trying our best to come up with ways to make your lives easier. We know that there are a lot of different ways, for instance, that you have to report your permitting data to us. You have the MORs, you have DMRs, you have nitrogen reports, you guys have toxicity data. We know that the Clean Water Fund applications are not fully electronic. You know, we know that there's issues, and we're always trying to find new technology that will be able to help you guys. So just know that even though we're asking you to do a lot of things and jump through a lot of hoops, we are trying to figure out ways to make it better. So we'll talk specifically about how we can help you with Clean Water Fund projects and navigating that process. But just I just wanted to talk about the new federal administration. So you guys are aware that we have a new president that's making a lot of changes. And all of those changes to federal programs like the state revolving funds, you know, it's happening very quickly, and we're working really hard with EPA to make sure that we give them what they want. But, you know, it's been a challenge, and I just wanted to let you guys know that for those of you that don't know, there is like maybe 10%, maybe sometimes 20% of the Connecticut Clean Water Fund is actually funded with federal money. It was a little bit more because we had the Infrastructure and Investment Jobs Act passed a few years ago. We used to call it the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law. With President Trump, now we're calling it IJA. So if I say IJA now instead of bill, that's what I mean. So because most of our funding for the Connecticut Clean Water Fund is from the state, we still expect to be in a very strong position, although, you know, you never know what's going to happen because federal grants do impact our agency, as I mentioned earlier. So, you know, we're working hard. We'll let you guys know about any official changes that come out, but right now nothing official has come out from EPA, so can't really, you know, report anything to you until things are official. Another thing that we found out recently was that the Clean Water Needs Survey, which Connecticut completed for 2022, it was reported to Congress last year. We found out that the amount of money that our state revolving fund is going to get in the future could possibly be impacted with the Clean Watershed Needs Survey. Right now, the amount of money that we get, there's the formula that doesn't take into account the survey, whereas drinking water, they do account for the needs that come about in the survey. So we're not sure how that will impact the numbers, but that remains to be seen. So I'm not sure if you guys can read these numbers, but I'll talk about them. So these are the pots of money that right now we expect to receive for the Clean Water Fund. So state obligation bonds, that is what directly funds the grants that the Clean Water Fund gives out. And for FY26, we expect to receive $133 million if the governor's budget passes the way that he's drafted it. And for FY27, $175 million. So that's pretty much what I requested when we put out our request to the governor's office last fall. That's good news. Of course, we don't know if that's actually going to be passed. As far as revenue bonds, which help to fund the loans for the Clean Water Fund, we expect to receive $50 million in FY26 and $500 million for FY27. As far as federal grants, as I mentioned, we get, you know, maybe 10-20% of our program funded with federal grants. Every year we get something called a federal capitalization grant. For FY26, we were expecting to receive about $19.5 million, which is up to the level that we had been seeing in years past before earmarks were taking money off the top with the congressionally directed spending projects, or they're called CDS. But there was something that came out from EPA last Friday where the president put out his proposed budget to Congress, and it recommends cutting the Clean Water Fund, what is given to the state revolving funds from like 3 billion down to 500 million, I think is what it said. 305 million. So that's quite a big cut. I don't know, again, if that's actually gonna be what's passed by Congress, but I'm just letting you know that that is what we received for information just on Friday. So even though that's a big dip, you know, maybe we're not gonna get that 19.5 million. Maybe it's gonna be a lot less than that. Remains to be seen. And then, you know, right now for IJA, we're expecting to receive a little over 30 million per year for the next 2 fiscal years. I hope that that continues. Not quite sure how that's all gonna pan out.
In the proposed budget, it's got all of the items.
Oh, all the, you know what, I didn't even, so again, this is like an evolving situation. We're always, so according to what was recently proposed, which again is not approved, IJA would be cut, and so the 30 million per year that we would get, we might not get. And we'll let you know once we get more information, of course. So, you know, how does that affect the Clean Water Fund? Well, remains to be seen, but I just wanted to give you guys an update about where the FY 26-27 priority list sits. We received everybody's project proposals. Thank you so much for that. Right now, we're evaluating or finalizing our evaluation of everything that was submitted to us. There were a lot of pump station projects, I can tell you that, which I think is really good news because I think there's a lot of pump station work that needs to be done in the state. So once we find out, at least from the state budget, which hopefully passes next month, you know, you never know, then we'll be able to finalize a draft of the priority list. And, you know, I would, fingers crossed, expect that we get a draft priority list out to public notice sometime in late summer. So, you know, stay tuned for that, but just a reminder, in the meantime, until that new priority list is put out, the old one doesn't expire. The FY 24-25 priority list will still remain in effect. Just a reminder that the priority list has 2 different types of projects. There are fundable construction projects that are scored based on their water quality benefits, and those are prescribed by the regulations. And then we have set-asides or funding reserves that don't rely on priority points. They're first come, first serve, but there are a lot of different types of funding reserves. We always have planning reserves and design reserves. We have a cost increase reserve, which has been really important recently because a lot of projects that are going now after the COVID slowdown have been coming in really high. We know the prices are really crazy out there, so we always have that cost increase reserve, and we hope to continue the level of funding that we're providing for infiltration and inflow projects and for resiliency and for green. So this actually does not come out very well, but you know, something looks one way on a screen and this is really hard to read, but I've got handouts if you're interested. So when I say that we want to help you guys make your jobs easier, what I'm seeing a lot of as prices come in high is that people that have wastewater projects that didn't expect to use the Clean Water Fund, and I know that the Clean Water Fund has a ton of strings that you have to deal with, a lot of hoops to jump through. So we're getting calls now from people saying, hey, I didn't expect to use the Clean Water Fund. I'm late in design and I'm a little bit short. You know, maybe my ARPA money was used for something else. Maybe one of the federal grants that I was expecting to receive got pulled back. So people are coming to me now a little bit late in the game asking how to make their projects fundable. And there are 5 basic things that I would strongly recommend if you want to keep all your options open in the future to making your project fundable just in case you need it. And these are things that you don't have to necessarily do if you're using the Clean Water Fund. I think these are good practices for everybody. The first one is use qualifications-based selection for hiring your consultants. I know that different towns have different rules, but if you document your QBS process, and I know it's easier for you guys to use the same consultants over and over again, but if you use QBS for your big projects and you document the process, this way, if you come to us later and say, hey, we would like funding from the Clean Water Fund, you'll be eligible, because if you don't use QBS, you're not gonna be eligible. Second thing I would recommend is if you get a scope of work from a consultant, you can always have DEEP approve the scope, even if you're not using them for reimbursement. It's kind of locking in your eligibility so that later on, if you need to have something covered, because if you don't get that pre-approval on a scope of work, we're not going to be able to fund the work that's done. The third thing that I would recommend is completing facilities planning. And I think this is a step that a lot of municipalities try to skip because they want to get something done quickly, but we offer 55% for planning grants. I think it's a really good idea, instead of doing things piecemeal, if you can, just to look at the big picture. Spend the time to do an overall facilities plan for the next 20 years. Because if you don't do that and you come to us late in the game, if you don't have that facilities plan done with an environmental review, you're not going to be able to get the Clean Water Fund. And if you don't do an environmental review, you're not going to be able to get state and federal funding. I would recommend that even if you don't think your project is going to be funded by the Clean Water Fund, when we do the call for projects with the priority list, submit the proposals anyway. It doesn't hurt to fill out the form and submit it. This way you're on the list, because if you don't have a construction project that's been submitted, you're not going to be able to get money from the priority list. And then finally, follow Clean Water Fund design requirements. Now, I'm not saying that if you go out to bid for a project and you know you're not using the Clean Water Fund that you have to put all of this stuff in your bid documents. But what I'm saying that if you loop in deep staff early into the early design decisions and you follow TR16 and you just loop us into what you're doing, you're gonna have any modifications to your facility, regardless of funding, be approved by us. But if you loop deep staff in, and then you have to make a last minute change to get your funding done through the Clean Water Fund, you're at least in a lot better position than if you hadn't done that. So I'm gonna turn it over to Kimberly, and she's gonna talk to you about the Clean Water Fund application.
Thanks, Yvonne. So this is something that we wanted to discuss just because we've gotten a lot of questions on the applications, and as Yvonne mentioned with the changing federal requirements, there's been just a lot of uncertainty. So we wanted to kind of give everybody some tips and tricks about the best practices. Again, as Yvonne mentioned, we know it's painful, so we're trying to make it easy for you guys as possible within what our requirements are. So the first thing is the timing of the application. So if you're submitting a request to award construction bids, please submit an application along with that. Our internal review and approval process usually takes about 60 to 90 days. So if you could give us as much time as possible, we really try hard to get everything reviewed and approved within, obviously, the bid time frame. If there's we don't want to do an extension if at all possible, but the more time you can give us, the better it is. So we appreciate that. The other thing is we wanted to make sure that everyone knew to involve bond counsel at the start of any loan agreement. They're familiar with a lot of the application requirements and the things that are needed from a legal perspective, and they can advise you. If it is a planning grant, your town attorney can probably advise you what your town charter says in terms of what your resolution needs to be drafted, whether it's the WPCA director that can sign that or the town manager or those types of things. And again, just to kind of reiterate what Yvonne said, the sooner you involve us, if you have a question and you're not even ready to submit an application yet, please reach out to us. The third thing we wanted to talk about is the completeness and the accuracy of the application. The biggest thing that holds up an application and our ability to execute an agreement for any of these projects is usually missing documentation. So there is a checklist right in the application. As Yvonne mentioned, we're looking at ways to streamline that, make it easier to submit. You know, it's a little bit outdated, so we're we're working on that for you guys. But in the meantime, just take a look at the checklists that are on there for section 2. There's one for planning grants, there's one for if it is a construction project, all the different types of projects. It gives you the checklist of items that are necessary for us to be able to complete your application and move your agreement forward. So again, if you go through that checklist and you're not sure what something is, please reach out to us. We're happy to answer any questions you have. The other thing that the Office of the State Treasurer wanted us to mention was that the town resolution does determine which type of pledge or the agreement template that we have to use. So there's a revenue pledge and a bonding pledge. There's all these different things. So make sure that, again, if you have questions, you can reach out to us as well as Kim Mason at the Office of the State Treasurer. That we have seen quite a few issues with that not moving forward because in order to issue debt under this program and enter into an agreement, the town does need local approval, and sometimes that's a referendum, sometimes the WPCA has a separate meeting. Again, that depends on your town charter, but we can, again, just kind of point you in the right direction on that. And as Yvonne also mentioned, we are seeing quite a few cost increases. Some of the resolutions are to the penny of what the agreement is, and with kind of the uncertainty and the delays and the cost increases that we're seeing, it is a good idea to go a little bit over if you can, just because that way if we have to do an amendment or there's an additional unanticipated cost, we can go ahead and move that forward without having to go back through your entire town process to increase that resolution. So that is something that we recommend. We know that there's a lot of local politics involved with that, so that's not always possible. So we understand that and recognize, and we'll obviously work with you on that, but just something that we wanted to mention, because if it is at all possible to put a little bit of a buffer in there, you only come in, the agreement can be for, say, $10 million. If it comes in at 9, you only take the loan out for that portion that you're actually using. So even if the agreement is a little bit over based on that, or we don't use that extra funding for the amendment, you're not taking on that additional debt because it's only based on what we actually reimburse you for the entire cost of the project. And again, just a reminder, part 1 comes to DEEP. It comes to a shared email box that we manage here. And part 2 goes to Office of the State Treasurer. Again, when in doubt, you can just send copies of both to both parties, or you can send it to me. I'll make sure it gets to the Treasurer's office. We know sometimes these are pretty large documents with quite a few attachments, so we're also working on some ways internally to get a better SharePoint site so that we can do kind of a Dropbox situation for you guys to submit that a little bit more easily. So more to come on that, and we'll certainly keep you posted. And the last reminder is not about the application phase, but more just to make sure that as you go through the process, as Yvonne mentioned, the sooner you can loop us in, the better it is. If you anticipate a change coming that is going to change the cost of your agreement, or you have invoices that are for local share that you haven't submitted to us, things like that, please submit them to us because we'll review everything for eligibility. That way, if down the road there is a change that requires something else, you already have the approval on file, we've already got all the documentation, and we can try to move as quickly as possible. So any kind of modifications to the project, we would appreciate that, again, just because we're happy to work with all of you. And that's all I had. So that was it. Thanks, everyone. Yvonne and I are at a table in the back corner over here. We have some handouts, and we're happy to answer any questions you have throughout the day.
Or if you have questions now.
Yeah, we've got some time.
10 plus years ago here, we were learning about the new phosphorus permit limits coming out.
Yep.
And how the EPA acknowledged that the program that DEP came up with, which we're grateful for, they finally accepted it. And it was always an interim program. And so for the last 10 years, we were waiting for something to change. And not too long ago, we were working on a permitting a project in Westport. It was a groundwater discharge, so it's a little bit different, and phosphorus came up at the last minute, and we thought, oh no, what's changed? Is it the state program? Is it Long Island Sound, or whatnot? So, so my question is what's happening with phosphorus? Do we expect to see DEP rolling out metals or aluminum limits? I'm adding to the question I emailed you, but. Do we expect to see any changes with iron limits? I know that was always an issue we're monitoring, but are we going to start to see anything happen in that respect? And can you give us a little insight as to what happened in that little Westport project?
So I was not able to get an answer about the groundwater discharge for the phosphorus project, but who did you speak to? Did you speak to Audra Dixon, or who were you guys? I know that that's Lauren Jones' group, but,
We heard back from Antonella eventually.
or from Antonella, that's right. Yep. All I can say is the information that we have right now from EPA is that even though it's an interim policy, what we did with phosphorus, as far as we know, for the wastewater treatment plant surface water discharges, we do not know of EPA asking us to add any more limits. They're very happy with what we've rolled out for all of the treatment plants. Everybody that was supposed to be receiving their phosphorus limit got it. As far as what you heard with the groundwater stuff, you know, I'll have to try to get more information. I wasn't able to get any when I asked around. As far as aluminum and iron, I think that in the future there has been discussion about doing an aluminum limit, but iron I haven't heard about. But again, as soon as we know something and we can tell you, but you know, truthfully, I don't know anything. So I did ask around.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
We're all good? Hi, how are you? Just two quick questions. First is, what's the status of the proposed general permit for POTWs for PFAS monitoring? That's the first question. Just the status, where it stands, as far as noticing or anything like that.
Do you want me to answer that one first, or do you want to do the other question?
Pardon me?
Do you want me to answer that first, or do you want me
No,
to wait for your second?
I'll ask the second one too.
Okay.
In late 2023, your industrial section published a requirement for electronic reporting of non-compliance issues with NPDES permits and pre-treatment permits. Does the municipal side utilize that same, I'll call it an e-platform, to report to the DEP?
So, as far as, what was the first question again? I'm sorry.
There is a protocol in the DEP right now for e-reporting of non-compliance issues with NPDES permits.
Oh, okay. I was asking about the first question. We're
Well,
not
the
using
first
the
question
same.
was when do you expect the PFAS general permit to?
The PFAS general permit, we were hoping that it was going to be ready to roll out earlier this year, but we anticipate that we'll get a draft out for people to talk about and have listening sessions by the end of the calendar year now. So
Okay.
we're a little bit delayed with that. Regarding what MMCA is using for reporting notices of noncompliance, we are not using the same platform. That is just for those permits, not for the municipal permits. Any other questions?
I know that this is being finalized, but do you think there'll be a resilience set aside in the next Clean Water Fund?
I really do. I mean, you know, I can never fully promise until it's done, but if we have enough money, I think that, you know, our commissioner really loves that reserve, so I definitely see that we're gonna be doing that, and I know it's something that everybody needs. And because there have been so many pump station requests, we're even considering doing like a separate pump station resiliency reserve, just specific for those types of projects, but yeah, I hope so, fingers crossed.
Awesome, thank you.
Yeah. Anybody else? Well, you guys, we're gonna be right there in the back corner. Come talk to us, okay? Thank you so much for having us.